Welcome to the Scientist with Heart podcast, my open diary of academic life. This is a space where I share my personal thoughts and reflections on research, teaching, and university life. These are my own opinions, and the aim is to spark discussion, exchange perspectives, and gather insights from others navigating the academic roller coaster at the bench and in the lecture hall. I recently learned something new. I went into a field that is totally unfamiliar and I digged into the literature. I needed a starting point, an entry point, and I wanted to get to know the state of the art of that research field for me to be able to oversee potential project options in this research field. So how did I get to know the literature in this new field without drowning? In this episode, I want to share my experiences with using large language models and AI tools to get an entry point, and also spin this thought a little further and think about the future of education, of science education. So in my scenario, it was a topic that is, of course, science related. I'm a scientist. I studied biochemistry. I'm very versatile in different areas of cell biology, molecular genetics. I know a lot about proteins, DNA, RNA. Nevertheless, every field is very, very special. And sometimes we do not know the special phrases, so the jargon that is used in a field. So it's a bit harder to find the right literature and papers. So my starting point with that specific niche of literature was a specific author. And from her work, I then budded outwards. So I pivoted outwards and I picked papers that were review articles, giving me a little bit of basic background on this type of field. And in a manual way, I would have gone with 1 or 2 or 3 review articles, started to read them, mark out the keywords that I find in these articles. I would try to get some review articles that are really state of the art, so that I really get into what is known, what is not known, and what people in the field use as keywords to describe their science. So now, in this new world and era of AI that we are living in, there are tools that do this for us. And I was curious because I'm a science educator and I regularly talk to my students about how they use AI, because I'm curious to learn how they approach this and what they use for their studies. And I cannot be a hypocrite and then not do it myself, right? Because I'm old school. I'm coming from the pen and paper era and I still love pen and paper. Nevertheless, I'm also all for efficiency and productivity boosting, and that's when I turned to an AI tool. At the time it was Notebook LM, and I fed in the information of this one author, her papers, and gave the tool the information that I wanted to have a broad knowledge on the state of the art of the field, with special focus on 3 specific points where I wanted to figure out if there is a project option. I did not expect the AI tool to give me all the answers. On the contrary, I was very critical and I was aware that there would be gaps, that there could be bias, that there could be something that is entirely missing. However, what I also knew is that the tool has the capacity to condense everything down into a presentation or a podcast or a little mind map, basically, and make life easier for me to get into this topic faster. Because the same steps I would have taken manually by picking out review articles, figuring out the jargon on the field, making little presentations for myself with all of the basic information, and learning by doing that about the field. So the AI tool does this for me, and then I can consume the output. The danger here is that when you're producing information and background information, PowerPoint slides yourself, then you're learning while you're producing them about the subject matter. If an AI tool does that for you, then you're very detached. And that's exactly what happened to me. It was really hard and I had to repeat 4 or 5 times to get the information into my head, because I had no connection to it whatsoever, because I didn't read the primary literature. The AI tool extracted information for me from that primary literature. So what indeed helped was to have different ways of consuming the material. That was visually by looking at the PowerPoint presentation or the mind map, and that was also listening to somebody speaking about the subject matter. That indeed was quite helpful to overcome this gap where I did not really invest time in, I did not spend time with the subject matter. Going back to topic, for me, this was indeed an entry point. And interestingly, as I knew I would not be working in that type of field, but I needed a certain degree of knowledge and information to be able to think scientifically in this research area, this entry point was very, very helpful. And I could manage to be very efficient and effective in diving into the subject matter. I reached a basic understanding of the subject matter and the gaps in the field. I could now myself go into the literature and assess different studies, understand what they were addressing and where the gaps were. And so all in all, it was very, very helpful. How would this be if I would now continue working on that topic? So I wanted to know the literature in a new field as a kind of side project. How do I approach this when I know that this new field is my new field where I'm going to be the expert at some point? I would probably do a combination of both. Yes, I would use the tools that are available to scan and screen the literature and give me an entry point. However, I would also go back to the review articles and to the primary literature and have my brain working on those. So to facilitate that and have it very efficient, I set myself a calendar and a goal. So if I want to be up to speed with a new topic, let's say I needed to know about RNA polymerases and I didn't know anything about RNA polymerases, 2 weeks is enough. So I screened the literature one day and I pinned down the main papers that I found and that I needed to look at. And then I scheduled for every day for 9 days basically. So the 4 days of the first week and the 5 days of the next week. I scheduled one review article and one original paper for each day. And I had a little notepad where I took notes. So I knew that 2 weeks later, I would be very, very knowledgeable about the basics of RNA polymerases and the state of the art. And at the moment, I would continue doing that because for my brain, it is very efficient and it works when I deal myself with the data. It is not important that you get to know all of the literature in a new field or the right literature. It is important to have an entry point that can be old school, diving into the literature search using Google Scholar or PubMed or something else, or it can be facilitated by a large language model and AI tool, something like Notebook LM. But the work then is to narrow down what do I want to know, what do I want to get with this new literature, and then make a plan, schedule it, and let your brain eat on the brain food, because only then there will be a really, really solidified knowledge sticking in your brain. So that's my take on how to get to know the literature in a new field and my experience about large language models and Notebook LM. Let me know how you dive into new fields and what your experiences are and also how it felt. Did you also feel a little bit detached if it presented you like a presentation and summary of all of the facts you need to know and it was harder to get to know them compared to as if you would have spent 3 hours yourself with the original data and the original papers? Let me know.